Hey everybody, it's Sunday afternoon and we are going to take another trip around the world. So we're going to start here at my 29 miscellaneous. I just got done doing a little bit of tank maintenance to it. I did not wipe down the glass, but I did get in there and wipe down the plants. You can see my Anubias is nice and green. I wiped a lot of that sort of brown grungy stuff that grows on there. And my Java fern here had both that brown stuff and had some of that green sheeting sort of slimy cyanobacteria that I get in some of my tanks. So I was able to physically remove some of that with my hands, and then a lot of it I was able to just sort of vac out as I was siphoning the water out of the tank. I was able to sort of hold the vac right there and just draw a lot of it right out. So I was able to get most of that out of the tank without grunging it up too bad. I also got in and did a filter change. I had to scrub out, once again, the biofilters. The biofilters in this tank, for some reason, get dirty and just pack with gunk really, really quickly. Every third or fourth time I get in here and change the filters, I have to clean those biofilters out as well. So today I shot a little video about it. Other than that, not a lot going on in this tank. I don't have any additional fish, and I have not lost any fish, so that's a good sign. I'll give you a little look at my Bolivian ram down here. I really like this guy. I'm assuming that's a guy. He's got that pointy dorsal fin like that. That sharp edge on it, and that high, the first 3 or 4 spines sort of stick up higher than the rest, and then it drops back down. I believe that's another sign that it's a male Bolivian ram. So moving on, I feel like we got a lot to cover this week, so I'm not going to really talk about stuff that I don't necessarily have to, or that hasn't changed in the last week. My 55-gallon gourami tank is finally starting to get some gouramis in it again. I know it's not news, but I will just reiterate that I do have that moonlight gourami in there now, and I also have this beautiful honey gourami, male, to go with the female that I had in the tank from before. I had a male and a female before, and the male died, and when it did, the female lost all its color and just turned almost white, almost like a translucent sort of color, just lost all its coloration. And it actually now looks like it's beginning to get a tiny little bit of color back to it now that I've got this male in the tank. I have noticed the tail fin on that male is a little nipped up. I'm not really sure who's doing that or what's going on, but his tail fin looks a little bit nipped up, so we will have to keep an eye on that. So recently I did a water change on this tank. I had an air stone in here for a little while. One of my Corydoras had been spending a lot of time near the surface, and I wasn't sure what was going on. I didn't suspect that the tank was running low on oxygen, but it's a possibility. So to rule that out, I put an air stone in the tank, and long story short, that did indeed rule it out. The Corydoras continued doing the same behavior even with the air stone in it. And so I did a big water change. I wiped the glass down. I removed a bunch of the plants, and now I don't see the Cory up there nearly as much as I used to. I have 3 of them in here, and one of them always kind of seems to be a loner. I like that little loach sticking his face out between the crack and the rock. So those 2 always hang out together in the back corner there, and then I've got that third Cory that always kind of seems to go off and do its own thing when it's on the bottom of the tank. And then a lot of the time it spends up near the surface. It still does it, but not as much. And it definitely does it at feeding time now. When I'm in there putting food in there, that Cory will be up on the surface, on its back, like it's an upside-down catfish or a synodontis or something. And so it's definitely learned how to get first dibs on the food rather than wait for it to float to the bottom. So I think that's honestly all that was going on, is just I've got an unusual Cory that's got some sort of odd behavioral quirks, and that's all. So far so good. I've taken the air stone out, and I haven't had any issues. I haven't seen anything that makes me suspicious that anything is, going wrong, or that the oxygen levels are low, or anything else. So moving on to my 55-gallon T-bar tank. I have not done anything in this tank this week, and you can see by the vast amounts of pleco poop on the bottom. You can see my pleco's nose right there. That's the spot it really likes to hang out in. The only thing I've got going on in this tank is the mystery of the high temperatures again. 27 is about where it's been sitting, and this morning I noticed it bumped back up to 28, but we've also had a really warm couple of days, and my dehumidifier has been running a lot. And when the dehumidifier runs, it just cranks warm air into the basement, and so I really honestly think we're just looking at ambient room temperature there. Although this tank is a degree or two warmer than the other ones. I've actually taken thermometers and physically tested all the tanks on both sides, and this tank is a degree or two warmer. So my next guess is that perhaps the filter is getting a little bit too clogged. I know that any kind of electronics in the tank is going to warm it up. My power head over here is, there's electrical current running through that. There are heat losses. That is putting heat in my tank. Only a little bit, but it is putting heat in my tank. The lights are adding heat. And, of course, the filter, as the water flows through the, electric pump in the filter, it's going to add some heat too. And as the filter gets more and more clogged and has to work harder and harder, you're going to experience more and more heat losses. So that is my next possibility, that we're just getting a little more heat in this tank because the filter's working a little bit harder. And so my next project is going to be to get in here and do some water changing and some tank wiping down and all that good stuff. And we'll get in there and we'll clean that filter out, and we'll see what happens from there. Maybe I can drop the temperature a degree or two. But otherwise, nothing really going on in this tank, or at least nothing, has changed. Likewise with my 40 breeder here. Not a lot to talk about. I mean, there's always a lot going on. There's a ton of little fish in here, and of course my angelfish got moved over here recently, which I'm really happy about. I love the angelfish in this tank. It looks fantastic. I'd really like to get some more of those neons, those dwarf neon rainbow fish, I should say. They complement this angelfish very well. But I've got so many fish going on in this tank at this point that I really don't want to add any more until, something happens. We experience some losses or something like that. So anyway, other than that, nothing really going on. I haven't done any water changes. You can see that the glass needs to be wiped down. I should probably get in there and do a filter change on this tank. I don't really remember when the last time I did one was. And whenever I get to the point where I can't really remember doing a water change on this tank, it's probably been long enough that I'm due for another water change on this tank. So we will be doing that hopefully in the very near future too. That's on my list of things to get caught up on. I have done maintenance on several tanks over the last few days, but this was not one of them. So there's a little bit of a look at it. Moving on, another tank that there's not much to talk about. I have not done anything to this tank with the reduced bioload in there. I haven't really been thinking too much about it. I've been consciously trying to feed it less, just so that I don't overfeed it, getting in the habit of feeding it the way I was before. But right now I'm reduced to 6 creek chubs. You can see 3 sort of stacked up on the bottom there and 3 stacked up on the top. In the back I've got a few of the shiners that are in there from way back a couple years ago when they first went in. And then I've got a couple of those white suckerfish on the bottom. This one that had injured itself when I moved it into the tank always just seems to lay low and stay in that spot. It's never really come out and been active like the other ones. So I'm not really sure what's going on with that. I don't know how well you can make it out or not, but against that stone in the back you can see a little bit of my Chinese algae eater lying on the sort of at a 45-degree angle. Its tail's off to the right. You can see it sort of wiggling around in the current there. So that's my Chinese algae eater. And somewhere in here I have my big pleco. And then of course we've got my spotted tilapia that always hides down here in the corner. So I do have plans for this tank. One of those plans is eventually to get in there and take my surface skimmer that got knocked off a long time ago and has fallen down between the rocks. I got to get that out. because I basically just have an open spout right there sucking water into it. Now this tank, I don't have any really small fish or snails or anything that I've got to worry about getting sucked into that little opening, but that is just an opening that's sucking water right into my filter, so I really should get that little floating valve out of there and stick it back on. And there is the tail of my pleco sticking out right there. So his head's down in the rocks. You can't really see it at the moment. So I've got ideas for this tank. I got some plans, rolling some ideas around. We'll get to them in the future. We'll talk about that soon, but not now. Have to work on that a little bit. Not a lot to talk about with my snail tank. I've been just trying to keep plenty of food in there to make sure the snails keep breeding. I do occasionally see a shrimp or two in there, so I know there's at least a couple shrimp still in there. I think there's more snails than the shrimp can possibly eat and stay on top of, so my breeding continues. And of course, all the fish food I throw in there, the snails, of course, have access to that. I mean, the shrimp have access to that too. And the more fish food I give them, the less likely they are to want to eat the snails or the snail eggs, and I can keep a good breeding population going on in there. My 40 breeder sized purple spotted gudgeon tank. This is not the tank that I call my 40 breeder, but it is a 40 breeder. And I really need to get in here and do another cleaning with the ChemiClean again. Ever since I've removed all of that floating vegetation, I've let light back into the tank in mad crazy amounts, and you can see I've now got all this growth going on again, and a lot of it is that cyanobacteria, grungy sort of stuff that's not your regular algae. And that's why I say I need to get in there with the ChemiClean. ChemiClean does not really affect algae, but it does affect this, what is referred to as blue-green algae, but is not actually algae at all. That is actually cyanobacteria, and that is what the ChemiClean gets in there and takes care of. We can just see the tail of my South American bumblebee catfish sticking out a little bit. I did get a few minutes of video of that the other day. Although it was the other end, you could just see its face sticking out a little bit. But it is still in there. It is alive and well. Somewhere in there is my purple spotted gudgeon. And as far as I know, although I have not seen it in quite a while, somewhere in there is also my rubber lip pleco. And I can already tell you by how clean and shiny all the rocks and everything are that my rubber lip pleco is still alive and well in there. The tank would not look like that. Handy dandy little fish at keeping a tank clean. So moving on to my 125, I'm going to start at this end because this is where we got the exciting new stuff going on in the tank, and that of course is my brand new albino millennium rainbow fish. Absolutely gorgeous little fish. I got 7 of them. I was only able to get 3 males and 4 females. That was all that was available. But I'm not unhappy about it. I don't think that the females are going to be unattractive necessarily. These are the females here. They've got the more pale yellow sort of appearance. And then you can see by contrast, the males are the ones that have that darker orange sort of appearance. And as they grow and mature, the males are going to turn almost a reddish color. And then the females will be a much darker orange, similar to what the males look like now. So I'm really excited for them to grow up. I have already seen spawning behavior. I've been reading comments and talking to different people about different ways and suggestions on breeding these and whether or not I'm going to take that seriously. My general approach to breeding is usually to just let nature take its course. I try to provide enough habitat for animals to hide in, and if, they can breed and some of the little fry don't get eaten and we start noticing some small fish swimming around the tank, that's usually how it works for me. Unfortunately, these fish will probably eat their own eggs. And of course, we've got other rainbow fish in the tank. I've got a shark and just other fish that are able to get into really tiny nooks and crannies. So while it is possible that some of the eggs would get scattered, I do believe these are egg scatterers. And if that's the case, some of them might fall down into the gravel. It's possible, but the likelihood of any of the fry actually surviving to be big enough for us to see them is probably pretty slim. So if I really do want to breed these, I'm probably going to have to do something specifically geared towards breeding them. In the meantime, I'm just kind of interested to see how they just kind of hang out. They don't really swim around like my Marcy rainbow fish do. These dart and dash and swim around, and they compete with each other. Now you can also see these are fully mature. In fact, these are pretty old as far as by rainbow fish standards. They're several years old now. But they swim around the tank much more. And in fact, we're even getting some of the spawning behavior. And this is from 2 males. I didn't get any females when I bought the Marcies. I only got males. And yet we still get this. I don't know if it's spawning behavior necessarily, but that's certainly competition. That's certainly displaying for spawning purposes. And I see that fairly often with these fish, even though, again, it's all males. So having some females, joining in with the males here, it's very likely that I will get some offspring. Now, I don't know if they'd be able to hybridize or not. That's going to be an interesting question, whether I'd be able to consider these, true millennium, true millennium albinos. If I did get any offspring in the tank, would I be able to guarantee that they were not hybridized with these Marcies? Because these Marcies themselves are a hybrid rainbow fish. I'm not exactly sure of their lineage, but I do believe that one of their parent fish is the Parkinson's rainbow fish. And if you actually look at a Parkinson's rainbow fish, they're very similar looking to these Marcy. So I didn't know what these were when I bought them. I just saw them in the store. They were gorgeous. I bought them. I brought them home. And then, of course, I did my research and found out that it's really hard to find, a listing for Marcy rainbow fish. In fact, when you look up Marcy rainbow fish, it will often redirect you to a page about Parkinson's rainbow fish. So, again, if they're hybrids, would they in turn be able to hybridize with my new millenniums? And then, of course, we've got that single Australian rainbow fish in there too, but I believe that's a female, so I'm not really sure how that would play into it. Maybe some of the offspring might turn out to be hers. Who knows? Anyway, that is all I've got going on new in the 125. I really do need to get in here and do a little bit of tank maintenance on this one. The glass tends to get a lot of grunge growing on it fairly quickly, and that is not because of the tank itself. All of that is from the light that shines on my waterfall tank, and I get a lot of bleed over that shines on this tank, and it's so intense that I get that growth on the glass. So that is coming from a light source outside the tank is what causes all that. I've got it turned off at the moment for the purposes of this video, however. And I'll leave you with one final look at my Synodontis. I've always been pronouncing this Eupteris because there's a P in there, E-U-P. But apparently, I believe it is pronounced Euteris. So, if you hear me call this a Synodontis Eupteris, that's why I'm calling it that. I've never seen it sit there with its barbels straight out in front of it like that. That's kind of weird looking. Interesting. It almost looks like he's half asleep, kind of dozing, laying on the bottom. He probably is. So moving on to my 20-gallon open-topped angelfish tank. Not much to talk about in this tank. I have got a little bit of a problem that I expected to have, and that's going to be with a lot of algal growth. We're going to see a lot of green, grungy stuff sort of growing around on the surface, I think, and that's just because of the intensity of the light source right there. You can see it shining down through that, and we're still putting that much light in the tank. So I don't have anything new to talk about in this tank. I did lose a couple of the bloodfin tetras. They jumped out. I found them on the carpet in the morning over the first couple of days that I put them in here. So I'm assuming that the rest of the fish that are in here are not really jumpers, and I'm going to be able to get away with keeping them in there. I may add a few more back in and see if we can get a little school that stays established and doesn't, have any jumpers in it. But we'll have to see how that goes. We can probably rely on the vegetation covering a lot of the surface will reduce jumping quite a bit. So again, we'll have to wait and see how that goes. But otherwise, not really much to talk about in this tank either. I haven't done anything or made any changes. I topped the water off today, but I did not actually do water change or anything like that. And then down in this tank, we're not even going to really talk about that one. That is just my quarantine tank. It doesn't even have any fish or anything in it. It's only got snails in it at the moment. So this tank got a lot of attention today. This is my 40 breeder brackish tank. And this is the home of the world famous Butterbean, my figure 8 puffer. And what I did today was about a 50% water change. I just got kind of busy doing other stuff, and the water just kept draining and draining. And I was working on the tank, but the water was draining all the while. And before I knew it, I had drained about half of the water out of the tank. So my plan was to refill it partially with freshwater. I was draining it with my big siphon. I was just going to reverse the flow of the water and start filling it back up with the fresh water out of my well. And I was going to simultaneously add some pre-mixed brackish water to it. And when it was all said and done, I was going to have a very low-end brackish where, I mixed the brackish with the fresh and I came out with some sort of low-end brackish. Well, I put way more fresh water in it than a 5-gallon bucket was able to compensate. And so I had to add salt 2 more times. And eventually I was getting a little impatient, and that's why you can see all that white speckly stuff in there. I just sort of poured the last little bit out of the jug, and it still had some undissolved crystals in there, and they all sort of settled onto the bottom, and that's what all that is. But I did bring the salinity back up to 1.003, so we're still sitting just below what is technically considered brackish, but I'm really close to the brackish range. 2 things that I want to point out while we're looking at this tank is the bumblebee gobies. I've said recently that I wasn't sure how many of them were still alive or what was going on with them. It had been so long since I'd really seen a bunch of them out swimming around. I was able to count 7 of them at once today, so there could be more than that, but there's the very least we've got 7 of the bumblebee gobies in there, and I think I want to keep adding to the school of them so that we do eventually get, it looks like bumblebees buzzing around the tank when we have, 15 or 20 little bumblebee gobies in there swimming around. They don't seem to bother Butterbean, and Butterbean doesn't seem to bother them. Well, that's a tongue twister. So they don't seem to bother Butterbean, and Butterbean doesn't seem to bother them. So having, a bunch of them in the tank won't be bad looking. I think it would be kind of neat having a bunch of them swimming around. The other thing I want to point out is my Java fern. It grows so strange in this brackish water, and of course now that we've got it below technically brackish, it is still, very salty. But it's not so salty that it could, be classified as brackish anymore. So we are getting a little more growth and we are getting a little more green. But what I have is basically one stem that comes up and then it just branches into all these little sort of branches that almost all those individuals are little separate Java fern. I really feel like I got in there, if I just sort of ran my fingers through it, I'd have dozens and dozens of little tiny Java ferns. You can kind of see right here on the end, all of these are all individual little plants that are growing off of the leaves. In fact, some of them have broken loose and are floating around. That's a little bit of Java fern. We have some leaves, or fronds, technically they would be from Java fern, and that's got a bunch of the part that's floating is dead. And then all that stuff that's hanging down is little babies that are growing off of the dying frond. So I've got tons and tons of young Java fern in here that it's, again, I've never seen one of my Java ferns grow this way, and it's clearly doing it because it's growing in the saltier water than I'm used to having the Java fern. There's that other molly. I was wondering where my other orange sailfin molly was. It's hiding down there in the bushes. This is another tank. I just got finished doing the water change and all the work I did to this tank right before we started shooting this video, so everybody's still a little freaked out in this tank too. So, as I've said before, with my plants that I sell, I will make sure my email is down below. If you're interested in plants for a brackish system, as I've had people ask me before, I can pull some of these Java fern out of here and ship these so that they've already been acclimated to a very low-end brackish environment. So if you're interested in plants for your brackish tank, check my email down below, and like I said, it'll only be Java fern. I do have some other stuff that will survive in brackish water, but as far as if you want something that's right out of this tank that's already acclimated, we can do something about that. Lastly, on this tank, I will say I did clean out the canister filter down there. It was pretty grungy, but not terrible. I did shoot a video about this, so you can check that out if you want to see it in any more depth. But ultimately, I found some shrimp living in the bottom of the canister filter, and who knows how long they've been in there, because this, I mean, the eggs might have gotten down there. They might have hatched and grown down there, because I don't know how shrimp would have gotten through my filter intake and right down there unless they went in as very small or eggs. But regardless, I did pull, one of them went down the drain before I could catch it, and I was able to pull two of them out, and I put them in the small tank that I have at the foot of my waterfall tank. It's got a bunch of guppies swimming around in there, and that already did have at least one ghost shrimp in there already, and so I just added two more today that came out of the filter of this tank. So that was my big exciting discovery for the day. I had shrimp living in the filter of my brackish tank. So there you go, everybody. I already posted a little update on my waterfall tank, so we don't have to worry about that one today. I will go ahead and get this uploaded and out to you all. I'm going to say thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this trip around the world, and I will see you real soon for the next one.